So in my last video about making these bolts, I showed and tried out this sanding adapter for the angle grinder, which I 3D printed, and it's for little 50mm diameter sanding discs with Velcro attachment. It directly threads onto the angle grinder and just needs to be hand tightened because during use it will tighten itself. And then just attach a disc which has a foam backing and it's ready to use. Since there was quite a bit of interest in this and not everybody has a 3D printer at home, I now make a version with common materials, and after that I will also explain why this is so useful for the lathe. And if you have a 3D printer at home, you can follow the link in the video description to download this file from my Thingiverse page. First of all, you need some hardware that fits the threads of the angle grinder, and a coupling nut like this would be perfect. But since M14 is such an uncommonly used thread size, you will have a really hard time finding this in a common hardware store. I got this from somewhere else, so what you're more likely to find is a regular nut, but sometimes not even that, but a dome nut I could find everywhere, so I'm using this. It doesn't quite fit all the way on, but that shouldn't be a problem. Then any scrap piece of birch plywood and a washer that fits the threads. This one doesn't because it's for M12. I will take care of that later. Now I'm marking 3 circles and also mark the center of that. Next I drill a hole with a 22mm Forstner bit about 5mm deep in one of the circles and all the way through in the other one. In the shallow hole I now drill all the way through with a small bit to locate the center on the other side. And now with a Forstner bit that almost fits the washer, I create a pocket for it. It doesn't have to be super perfect. On the through hole you can now plop the nut in and just trace around it. On this one it kind of fits, and that's good enough for eyeball centering it and also trace around it. I made the first mess with a power tool, now I make the second one with a hand tool and chisel away the material so the shape is hexagonal. No need to make this into a masterpiece, it just needs to fit the nut. This is actually a little bit too loose. I would like to have it jam a little bit onto the nut, but well, I go with that. Now the same for this, but not all the way through because half of the hex part is already in here. Here it's a great fit. I did a mess with power tools and with hand tools. Now let's do a mess with magic. Great! And there I got my circles cut out. One thing I forgot was a through hole in this piece for the threads. Now assembling is pretty straightforward, just put the nut in there and this piece, and it sticks out here a little bit, so I need to remove some material here as well. Yeah, that's good, now it fits. And I can glue this sandwich together. Okay, while this is drying, I can this washer make fit these threads. A step drill like this is the perfect job for this, but you might not have that. But you can also just use a round file. There you go, perfect. On the off cut I now mix some 5-minute epoxy. And you can now watch 1 minute of mixing in just 1 second. And done. Now I have to work fast because this is actually 2-minute epoxy. I scratched the surface a little bit of the washer. Spread some glue, some epoxy in this pocket. Now I can drop in the washer. And shit, it squeezes out to the middle. And now I can thread this onto the angle grinder to apply some pressure. And hope that I don't glue it to the angle grinder. The epoxy is dry and this now works great. And I can start shaping it. This shape works great, so I will do the same on this one, but first I try to remove a bit more material. That's enough for now. I tried to get it symmetrical so it's also pretty much balanced when I now spin it with the angle grinder and bring it to its final shape. The setup for the final shape is a little bit questionable, but it totally works. I have a wood file in my vise and I'll be using the front teeth because you never really use them, so they are pretty sharp and basically new. And I will now just spin the angle grinder with the attachment and hold it against these teeth. While I'm doing this, it gets more and more balanced and I feel less vibration from it.
You have to be aware of the direction of cutting, so if it grabs for whatever reason, it should pull the angle grinder away from you and not push it into your guts.
Now I'm at my target diameter of about 45 millimeters, and now I will do the same with a round file to smooth out the surface a little bit. The shaping of this went great and pretty quickly actually. Next now is the foam pad. On the 3D printed one I used a microcellular rubber and it's perfect, but it's a bit hard. And I want to try something softer on this one, so I have this foam, which is just some kind of packing material. As you can see, this is about how soft it is or how hard it is. I used this on other sanders before and I know it works great. So I now cut a piece that's a bit bigger than a sanding disc. For gluing this onto the foam you need a good foam glue, and I use Pour for that, which is a contact glue that stays flexible once it's cured. And it's pretty easy to apply. You just put it or apply it on the pieces you want. A bit thicker here. And now I spread the glue on the other surface and then separate them again and let it dry for about 10 minutes. Wow, time really flies by in a video. Now after these 10 minutes the glue is dry to the touch, and now you just press them together once really good. And that's it. I will now cut away the corners and the rest will get sanded. To check the size, I just use a sanding pad and I'm not quite there yet. Now that I'm there, the next and last part is the Velcro pad, and that should be the highest quality you can get. I got mine online and this is actually an offcut piece from a different project that I used this on. I just now stick this on, cut out a circle and glue it on with the same glue as before. This Velcro material actually has an adhesive bag which is incredibly strong, but a little glue can't hurt. And that's it. It's very strong. I could remove it if I really wanted to, but removing the sandpaper won't damage this at all. I now also sanded the Velcro pad so it's perfectly round and concentric to the rest, and also a little bit smaller than the sanding disc, so it overhangs the edge a tiny little bit. And now it's finished and ready to use, so let me show you and demonstrate why this is so useful for the lathe. Now I've prepared a bowl here that I just rough turned a little bit, and I could do a much better job of getting a smooth surface with the turning tools, but let's pretend I just started turning and am not able to get a super smooth surface with the tools, or it's just a difficult wood to work with. Then the only way to get it really smooth is with sanding. And I think the most important part about sanding that I learned is the lowest grit that you start with has to be absolutely perfect. Because with the first grit you not only sand the wood surface, but you also still shape your workpiece. And anything that you missed, some tear out or tool marks that you don't hit with the first grit, you won't be able to hit with the other grits, because they are only there to remove the scratch marks from the previous grit. So that's why the first grit has to be perfect. But the problem there is this sanding sometimes takes a lot of time, and I've tried so many different methods to speed that up. First of all, I built this spinning sander that holds these pads, and this doesn't really speed anything up, it just randomizes the scratch pattern because it rotates. That's just good for the higher grids. Then I've made a version for the drill that I can just chuck in, and it kind of works, but this distance here is just too big and it sometimes really grabs and it's hard to control, and it only can spin as fast as the drill can, so it worked kind of, but it's not the optimal choice. Then I've got this pneumatic sander, which is basically a random orbit sander powered by compressed air, and this is an awesome tool. This really sped up that sanding and I really like using it, especially for the higher grids. But still, for the first grid, it's not the best, and that's why I now have this. The angle grinder with this is just so aggressive with sanding, and that's exactly what I need for the first pass.
When you're using this, you should only apply good pressure for about 4 seconds at a time and then let it cool down for 2 seconds. With this, the sandpaper and everything here can get really hot really quickly. Be aware of that.
Crap. Reminder, use a charged battery. Doesn't have to be that perfect.